All eyes are on the Supreme Court this week as we get decisions on a number of important cases. Millions of Americans are waiting to see what the court will do with President Biden's student loan program, which aims to erase up to $20,000 in loans per borrower. Now, the cost of college has more than doubled in the 21st century, taking into consideration student loan interest and loss of income. The total cost of a bachelor's degree may exceed $500,000. That's at least according to the Education Data Initiative. So, as an investor, how should you start to think about saving up for the expense? Here with some tips is content creator Ross Mack, Macconomics financial expert. Ross, this is really kind of the final piece when you think about the uncertainty around student loan repayments. The president has even expressed pessimism that the court will rule in his favor. What do you think is going to be the most immediate impact if, in fact, student loan forgiveness is where the Supreme Court rules against student loan forgiveness?
Well, one, I always try to err on the side of caution where I only say I can only control what I can control. In the event that the Supreme Court actually does rule in his favor, then I think consumers are going to be a lot more healthier, right? I think from a consumer sentiment standpoint, people will obviously have a lot more money in terms of earnings that they'll be able to maintain as opposed to actually paying out student loans.
Ross, for those out there who do have some extra money, maybe they aren't faced with student loans, maybe they're trying to figure out the best ways to position themselves going forward. And I know one of your big focuses is building generational wealth. If you're looking to be in a position where your kids maybe hopefully won't need to take on student loans, a couple of different ways to save there. The first idea that you have is a 529. How does it work? Why does it make sense?
I love that question. The thing is, I try to tell people, let's try to focus on giving our kids the experiences that we didn't have as opposed to the frugal things we didn't have, right? So in other words, let's teach them what we didn't know as opposed to trying to give them the new Jordans, right? So for me, it's like, why not give our children the ability to, one, learn about investing, but two, also have the ability and the freedom to graduate college without any student loans. And like you said, in the next 18 years or so, we're talking about over $500,000 for when my kids getting ready to go to college. So the way I'm thinking about it is, let's start putting money aside today and being very intentional. So a 529, I want you to look at that as a tax advantage college savings plans where you can literally start putting money aside today and that will grow effectively tax free. So as long as you're using that money for qualified educational expenses, whether that's obviously tuition, room and board, books, and what have you.
18-year timeline is a very long one, Ross. There's a lot of parents looking at this saying, well, when do I start putting that money aside? What do you say?
So I would say the sooner the better, right? And when you really are thinking about this, you have one thing on your side, and that is compound interest, right? And the words of the great Einstein, he who understands compound interest earns it, and he who doesn't pays it. And so compound interest is the ability for your money to start making interest, and that interest is thus being reinvested. And so the sooner rather than later. So for me, I have several accounts for my children, one being a 529, where I'm starting to take money out every check, every month, right? It's all about being consistent, as well as a custodial account. I think a custodial account is another great thing that is a great learning opportunity for your children because, one, you get to actually teach them how to become owners of some of their greatest businesses that they actually use, right? My daughter's on YouTube every day. She wants to watch Miss Rachel. Well, guess what? I want you to also own the owner of YouTube, right? Let's own Google, right? Let's own, as obviously she'll get older, she'll want to own whether it's Meta or Chipotle or McDonald's. And so I think having an actual custodial account, it's important to, one, start allowing them to start learning about the way the world works, but also allowing them to become owners.
Ross, you mentioned Miss Rachel. We're big fans of Miss Rachel inside our house as well. But people are trying to figure out how much money to set aside or to allocate to each of these types of accounts. I guess when you're trying to figure out how much to put in a 529 versus a custodial account, how should people be thinking about that?
I love that question. So one, when it comes to figuring out how much, obviously you can work backwards. There are several, almost call it investment aggregators online to say, okay, in 20 years, I want to have $200,000. How much? And you say what your, expected rate of return would be. On average, if we're talking about the S&P 500, that's going to be 10%. So if you say on average, this is what I want to do, and you can obviously work backwards. I say at a minimum, right, you want to start I won't say a minimum because everybody's going to be in a different financial standpoint, but I think the goal is to start, say $50 or $100 a month. And as you begin to make more money, so, you will also be able to amp up and say, okay, I want to raise it from 100 to 150 or 200, et cetera. And I think that is really how you do it. But it all starts with the budget, right? I think, once we understand and figure out better ways to understand what our outflows are, we'll be able to purely say, okay, let's make saving and investing a priority. Let's also make that a bill. And so now not only do we have, our mortgage, our car notes and, insurance bills, et cetera, things that we got to pay on a monthly, but let's also pay our 529 account. Let's pay our custodial accounts. Let's pay our own personal retirement accounts. So I look at it as saying, let's make it all a bill, but you start off, maybe $50 or $100. And as you continue to make more money, maybe you start increasing that allocation size.
Ross, I'm curious about that investment conversation you have with your kids, because I've heard this discussion in so many households where, for example, parents say, look, you pick the name that you like so kids can understand better what that investment thesis is. How do you open up that conversation? I'm just curious how you've had it with your kids.
Well, I think we all are tied to the things that we utilize on a day-to-day, right? And so right now, if I have an Apple phone, if I have an iPhone, if I'm on a Mac, on an iMac, or if I have AirPods, it's great to start having the conversation with my kids like, hey, listen, Apple owns this. If we're eating and driving past McDonald's all the time, it's great to let them know, okay, you can actually own this company. And so for me, the conversation, and obviously, if you see my content, my kids are 2 and 1, so it's pretty early, but I love having a conversation anyway, because when we start talking about certain shows that my daughter watches on Disney, well, guess what? You own Disney. And so I think what's very important is to understand, look, guys, as the world, we are all consumers of something, whether it's a service or actual business, but nonetheless, there's an ability, right, if it's a public company, to also be an owner. And that way, if your friends, right, if your kids' friends are going to McDonald's or Chipotle or wearing Nike, guess what? You could actually own that. And now as your child looks and say that they're owners, they're also looking at their friends and saying, thank you. Thanks for shopping with me now.
Ross Mack, appreciate your takeaways here as always. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. If I could say one thing, I'm having a Maconomics Wealth Summit here in Chicago on July 9th. And it's all about this conversation, right? It's for the community to actually help individuals understand how to better, attack wealth, right? I think we have to have these conversations early on. We have some amazing people coming out. We'll be talking about life insurance, retirement planning, also how to ensure your kids can graduate without any student loans. And so July 9th, Maconomics Wealth Summit here in Chicago is going to be amazing.
Got to get that plug in. Ross, thanks so much for that.
Thank you.